Cristiano Ronaldo's health habits to delay retirement. Well, as you know, the 2026 World Cup just ended. I think we can all agree it was an incredible tournament. So many legendary moments and stories coming out of it. Now, one thing that really caught my eye was the reported training and lifestyle regimen of Portugal's Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, I want you to picture this. Ronaldo is 41 years old. Around him are teammates and opponents half his age. And yet, he's still sprinting at over 20 miles an hour, running about 5 miles a game, still scoring goals, and still being tracked by GPS vests as one of the fittest bodies on the field, having scored nearly 1,000 goals over his senior career. So how does he do it? I'm about to go through Ronaldo's training and lifestyle choices and tell you what I think about it. But first, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe, like it, and share it with your friends. Okay, here we go. Number 1, he does 2-a-day training with built-in recovery blocks. He trains roughly 3 to 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, mixing technical drills, sprint agility work, and gym sessions. But it's structured around dedicated rest days and recovery work, not just constant grinding. The volume only works because he has a medical and coaching team constantly adjusting his loads, so he adapts without breaking down. Now, there's one thing we can learn from this, and that I've written about in many of my books. If you're going to do a rigorous training session, whether it's strength training, whether it's sprint training, whether it's HIIT training, you've got to have recovery periods. And usually they should be at least a day, several days a week. Why? You build muscle by damaging muscle. And when muscles are damaged, they do 2 things. They actually send out help messages that, hey, we're getting beaten up down here, and send reinforcements. Make us stronger. So we build more muscle by damaging muscle. And so if you don't allow for rest and repair, you're just going to keep damaging muscle. And that's where many of these not so great athletes and many weekend warriors make that mistake. I see this all the time, particularly in my marathoners and ultra marathoners. They never take a break to recover. All right, number 2, he eats 5 to 6 small meals instead of 3 big ones. Now, he spaces his meals every 2 to 4 hours to keep energy and metabolism steady rather than spiking and crashing. Now, his breakfast typically centers on an avocado, eggs, and coffee, fat, protein, and a little caffeine, with almost no refined sugar or processed food. Now, I don't have a big problem with that because obviously it's working very well for him. But it's one thing to be 41 and doing that, but it's quite a different thing, I think, as you get older. Because just like he's getting rest periods for his muscles to repair, what I've found is our gut has to have rest periods to repair the damage of digestion. And that's where time-restricted eating, intermittent fasting comes in. The longer the period of time you have for gut rest during the day and night, then the more that rest period allows you to repair your gut. And that becomes more and more critical the older we get. And this is something I actually see in my patients all the time. We know that we're told by the time we hit 60 that human beings should increase the amount of protein that they eat because our protein requirements somehow magically increase. Well, why would that be? We have less muscle mass as we get older. Surely our protein requirements would go down. But what I've found from my research is the reason we might need more protein as we get older is that the wall of our gut has been badly damaged through the years. Now, normally, we have an absorptive surface area of a tennis court lining our gut, but through damage from the lectins and other foods that we eat, for many of us, as we get older, all we have is a ping pong table instead of a tennis court to absorb food. And shockingly, when I put people on my program and actually reduce their protein, their total proteins and their albumins go up rather than down. Why? Because we've repaired the wall of their gut. So, good for him at 41. I'll bet you he'll find that as the years go, he's going to want to cut back on how often he eats. All right, number 3. He cuts out dairy, bread, and processed foods almost entirely. No alcohol ever. Now, according to a former private chef, his diet leans on fresh, minimally processed, protein-rich meals. Fish, chicken, beef, vegetables, and healthy fats like coconut oil. Now, lunch and dinner follow the same formula with the protein source rotated to keep things varied. So, the first 2 things he's doing, I'm a huge fan of. I think most of our diets, as I wrote about in The Gut-Brain Paradox and in the upcoming book, Feed Your Brain, ought to be based on fish, shellfish, and pastured poultry. I have a big problem with beef, even grass-fed, grass-finished beef, because of a horrible sugar molecule called Nu-5GC that we react to. Now, the reason he's removed dairy also has Nu-5GC, and many people react to Nu-5GC with inflammation. But the good news is, fermented dairy, like yogurts, like kefirs, like fermented aged cheeses, that Nu-5GC is eaten by bacteria. And so that actually, for most of my patients, is a safe food. I'm not a big fan of coconut oil as a major part of the diet. Why? Oils should actually be used to deliver polyphenols. And coconut oil has very few polyphenols. On the other hand, olive oil has 10 times more polyphenols than coconut oil. So I'd change that out in his diet. All right, number 4. He does polyphasic sleep, not one overnight block. So instead of one long night's sleep, Ronaldo's recovery is reportedly built around 90-minute sleep cycles spread across the day, rather than a fixed 8-hour night. Now, it's commonly described as 5 90-minute cycles that roughly total 7.5 hours, though the actual cycle count reportedly flexes based on recovery demand rather than running on a strict daily schedule. I couldn't do that. My patients wouldn't let me. I'm amazed that his staff lets him get away with this because I'm not quite sure how he fits that into a day. But I won't quibble with it. I'll bet you he's got multiple sleep trackers like I do. And if what his sleep trackers show is getting good, deep sleep, which is when we do our brain cleaning, have at it. All right, number 5. So Ronaldo has a very comprehensive recovery program. So let's take a look. So he uses cryotherapy, his most documented recovery method, confirmed over a decade of use. He's used whole body cryotherapy since around 2013, exposing his body to temperatures as low as 140 degrees centigrade, minus centigrade, for 2 to 3 minutes. It's well documented enough that he installed a personal chamber in his home. He also uses ice bath and cold plunges, used alongside cryotherapy, not instead of it. Now, reports describe his cold water immersion around 50 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 15 minutes after his heaviest sessions. Now, think about it. That's actually not very cold. In fact, to give you an idea of what that temperature is like, most wine cellars, where wine is aged, average about 50 to 55 degrees. And you can do quite well at 50 degrees for 10 to 15 minutes, not 0 degrees. So I think this is a very good trick that he's learned. He also reportedly starts every day with a cold shower. And maybe he doesn't have a very good heating system, but it's the same thing. A cold shower, a Scotch shower, is a really good way to have cold therapy. Now, what's the benefit of this? It turns out that this cold therapy does uncouple mitochondria. And if you've read any of my books about the mitochondria, like The Energy Paradox, like Unlocking the Keto Code, you know that the benefit of these therapies is actually in uncoupling mitochondria to allow them to repair themselves and to protect themselves. Speaking of which, he uses red light therapy. Now, Real Madrid installed red light recovery beds at their training grounds in the early 2010s, and Ronaldo was reportedly a frequent user. Why is that? Well, it turns out that red light therapy also uncouples mitochondria and also produces mitogenesis, building of new mitochondria. And since mitochondria are the power plants that make energy, who wouldn't want more energy at a player of Ronaldo's caliber? He also apparently has a hyperbaric oxygen chamber in his home, breathing pressurized oxygen to boost tissue oxygenation and speed healing. Now, there's no doubt that hyperbaric oxygen can improve tissue oxygenation and speed healing. We use it in traumatic brain injury. We use it in plastic surgery to speed healing of skin grafts, of flaps. We use it in trauma patients. So it works. And remember, he's damaging his body, so he's got to speed the healing process. And using this, for him, is probably a great idea. For us mere mortals, probably not all that important. Number 7, percussion massage and compression. Now, that's the everyday layer of his recovery stack. Massage guns, like Theragun style, targeting quads, hamstrings, and calves, plus compression boots, are described as a near daily part of his routine, sitting alongside sauna sessions for circulation and muscle relaxation. And you see this in almost all of these great athletes' training sessions. They really use massage therapy. They use fascial stretches, fascial therapy. They use sauna. Sauna is a great method of detoxifying many compounds that get into our circulation. Okay, so we've gone through Ronaldo's training, diet, and recovery plan. Now here's what is my overall opinion. He's doing a lot of great things to keep his elite status going for as long as possible. And we've seen the same thing here in Los Angeles with LeBron's training methods. Here's a guy who's about to be 42 years old playing as an all-star. And LeBron uses many of these same training options. Most of us don't have our personal trainer, our personal massage therapist, our personal fascial stretcher. We don't have these machines in our offices. And here's my final take. The folks who I visit in their late 90s and early 100s, who are fantastically in good shape, are people who are herding their goats, who are herding their sheep, who are working in their gardens, who are hanging around with their friends, who are walking everywhere, who are walking after dinner, who socialize. They have none of these advantages. And yet when you look at them and look at their blood work, they are fantastic ultra-centurion athletes in their own way. So if you want to do like Ronaldo and have the money, knock your socks off. But on the other hand, if we look at how super old people got to be super old and look at their lifestyles, in my humble opinion, what they did is they took care of their gut, they moved in nature, they socialized, and that got them to be the centurion survivors that they are.